Etymotic has been in the high-end IEM scene for a long time. When I first started collecting headphones, I started by collecting earphones. And at that time, there was basically 4 recommendations on the high end of the market. The Shure SE530, the Sennheiser IE8, the Ultimate Ears TF10, and the Etymotic ER4S. All under $1,000. What innocent times. The Etymotic was regarded then as the sort of high-frequency detail king, but a lot of people, including myself, were scared off because the Etymotics were kind of known for having a subdued bass response that some people consider accurate and other people consider anemic. Now, this would be a good chance to have a whole video about subjectivity and objectivity and references and relativity, but we're not going to do that because the market has moved on. And now, after many years, Etymotic has released a refresh of the ER4S, the ER4XR, and they've also released this, the new Etymotic ER4XR, an earphone with a custom driver tuned to sound like the SR in the highs, but with a 3 to 4 decibel bass boost in the low frequencies below 100 Hz. And I know 3 to 4 decibel bass boost in low frequencies below 100 Hz may not be the sexiest sentence in the world, but believe me, this earphone is awesome, and here's why. This channel does not accept review units, so I rely on support from viewers like you to keep doing what I'm doing. Check out the Patreon exclusive rewards at patreon.com/LachlanLikesAthing. So let's start with design and comfort. Now, firstly, these earphones look like $349 laser guns. Pew, pew, pew. Secondly, they don't look much different from the old ER4S. Here's what's changed. The earphone body is now made of aluminium, and the cable is a detachable, non-rotating MMCX style connector. You get a lightweight Kevlar coated cable. It's basically a no-fuss, practical design. One thing I don't like about this design is that the left and the right channel are not clearly differentiated. There's just a little bit of an L and an R very faintly in the black rubber on the cable. But at this point, you're probably not even paying attention to the cable. You're looking at this tip and you're thinking, how is this gonna feel going into my ears? Am I really ready to try deep insertion? Am I really ready to have a new, intimate relationship with earwax? Well, I can tell you, my first time was pretty scary as well, but I got used to it. Etymotic uses these triple flange ear tips to block out as much noise as possible. Now, whether they're comfortable for you is probably very dependent on the shape of your ear canal. For me, I found them surprisingly comfortable. Now, the earpieces are quite lightweight, and you just have to get used to the sensation of the weight being distributed along your ear canal instead of your outer ear, like with other earphones. The only thing I had an issue with is that when you wear them cable down, like this, the slight weight of the cable still pulls on your inner ear, which doesn't feel great. Now, you can fix this somewhat by using the included cable clip, but I prefer just to wear them cable up, like this, even though it looks a bit goofy. Now I just live in constant fear of someone bumping into my head and like ice picking me in the brain with these, like Trotsky. Don't expect to be able to sleep on these comfortably either. Now, if you aren't ready for the triple flanges, you can use the included foam tips, but I find them a bit fussy and uncomfortable and not great sounding. You can also use narrow bore spin fits on them, but I find that you lose most of the bass that way. Now, this may sound very annoying, but in exchange for all this deep penetration, you get incredibly good noise isolation, and you get it without annoying... incredibly good noise isolation, and you get it without annoying battery packs like you get on the Bose QC20 or the Sony EX750NA. You also don't have that ANC hiss, And another advantage over active noise cancelling is something that I particularly felt on my recent flight to Hong Kong, where there was basically hour-long stretches of turbulence on the plane. Now, when I tried to wear my Bose QC35s to test out the noise cancelling, I actually found that the noise cancelling on top of the turbulence made me feel very queasy. So I wore the Etymotics instead. Now, they still don't block out as much low frequency noise as the Bose active noise cancelling, but I'll take that over vomiting. Let's talk about sound. Now, when I first got these, I wrote up a first impressions post on Reddit in which I described them this way. You know when you are really thirsty and you have a glass of water, and somehow a plain glass of water tastes incredibly, indescribably delicious. And in that moment, it's somehow not just plain water, it's water plus. That feeling, to me, is the ER4XR, a $349 glass of water plus. And what I mean by that is that you think of a glass of water as something clear, transparent, and neutral. It shouldn't have any flavor. But then you add something more to it, and then there's this wonderful taste without losing that original clarity. And that's how I feel about the way Etymotic has tuned the XR, with just that extra little bit of bass in the low frequencies that makes things sound awesome. Adam Nelson says, but water has its own flavor. I don't know if that's just a fact of the United States water supply, but I assure you water doesn't really have a flavor in Australia. Now, Etymotic Research is a real old school company, one of the first to use balanced armature drivers, originally designed for hearing aids in products designed for music listening. Now, they have a very precise approach. And when these flagship REMs are made in the USA, every single unit is hand matched within 1 decibel between the left and the right channel. And each unit comes with this neat little frequency response graph. And Etymotic tries to tune their REMs against an acoustic target curve, which they feel most closely matches what people hear during a live performance. So this graph is really useful because it tells you a little more about what you're hearing. Now keep in mind, you can't compare this graph with other frequency response graphs without an idea of the testing rig, the methodology, and the compensation they've used to produce this graph. But there are a few noticeable things to point out from a graph like this. Firstly, this hump in the mids. Now, Etymotic claims that this is to compensate for the loss of the horn effect of the outer ear when you bypass it with earphones. Now, I can actually hear this hump. It sounds sort of brassy and raw and trumpety in the vocals, and for some people, it might be a bit much. But for me, and oddly, I'm often sensitive to this kind of excessively forward mids. The XR actually sounds just fine to me. It makes things sound really stunningly clear, and it has this kind of raw clarity to it that's really rewarding. Now, this is a bright earphone for sure, and it's brighter than anything else that I own pretty much. It's brighter than the Etymotic 2 or the AKG N40, but it's also really clever in how it brings that brightness and that detail, because it does it without sounding harsh. It just sounds super articulate and clear, particularly vocals. And at the same time, you can see on this graph exactly what the XR does in the low frequencies. There's this gentle rise into the sub bass, and to me, this is the best part of the XR. The bass on this IEM is great. It's just really punchy, articulate sub bass that can really surprise you with just how much rumble and slam and depth it has. But this sub bass comes with virtually no mid bass bleed, and in fact there's so little mid bass bleed or boom on some tracks that compared to other earphones, it might lack a sense of that fullness in tone, because the bass on the XR is predominantly in the very lowest registers, and the XR, compared to other IEMs I have, like the Sony XBA Z5 or the AKG N40, it doesn't have that sort of wet or almost thumpy sense to the mid bass. But that's fine, because the Etymotic is doing its own unique thing, and it's doing it by cleanly separating the mid bass from the sub bass. And I'm just as happy listening to Dvorak as I am listening to Kanye West on this. It's not like my other earphones, but it's really nice in its own way. Is it perfect? No. There are limits to using a single balanced armature driver. Now, the ER4XR lacks a little in terms of high extension. Now, I can verify this with test tones, because basically I can hear up to about 18 kilohertz, and the XR, like it says on the spec sheet, does top out at about 16 kilohertz. I'm like, totally okay with not being able to hear a mosquito that wandered into the recording studio, because it doesn't really have much of a practical effect. More importantly, the XR may not sound overtly harsh, but it still can sound a bit raw, and it has a sort of mid-forward blare to the sound that the smoother ATH IMO 2 doesn't have. Now, I think of the XR as a natural upgrade to the IMO 2 that I've been looking for a long time, because it does have a better bass section, a punchier bass, and a clearer vocal section, but it doesn't have the same smoothness as the IMO 2. And if you wanted something with similar levels of clarity, but with richer bass tone, and less mid rawness for around the same price, I'd go the AKG N40, which I picked up in Hong Kong, and so far I'm liking a lot as well. Overall, these are fantastic IEMs, and they're my new reference for a sort of balanced or neutral sound alongside the ATH IMO 2. So in closing, I know a lot of you will be skeptical about paying this much for a single BA IEM, but I think these are fantastic. They basically have a sound that nothing else in my collection has, and they do it with tremendous noise isolation to boot. Screw these into your ears, press play, and enjoy. And happy listening. Yes, I said screwed. Some of these things are not meant to be innuendos. It just so happens that when you talk about one object going into another object, it always sounds worse than it is.